So, for those of you who may or may not know, there has been a couple of big-ish things going around the internet, mainly to do with the EU's updating of their digital copyright laws. Now, I fully agree that digital copyright laws need to be updated, because currently the laws that we have are basically massively behind where the internet really is today. So the laws need to be constantly updated to basically to keep up with the internet. And even by the time most of these laws are thought up and implemented and passed and are finally in place, the vast majority of time they're already out of date. So digital law needs constantly updating. So the big thing and the worry that you've mainly seen a lot of the anti-EU people being posting about is the new updates. Specifically Article 13 that was in there, but also Article 11. So these were the two main reasons why it got rejected. And yes, I say rejected because the European Parliament has rejected it. It's been sent back to the Commission with specifically to alter these laws, particularly, well, these two articles. So these articles are being dropped or even got rid of completely. So you'll notice, as I've said multiple times, these people who complain about the EU, they never mention what's in the rest of these articles, specifically what the other things they do, like ensuring digital freedoms, ensuring Creative Commons was an actual thing, particularly in the EU, because the DMCA, the Digital Millennium Copyright Act, really only applies to US law. It doesn't apply to things like European law. So you have particularly these two things. Now, I fully agree these two articles were completely wrong. For example, Article 13 would basically insist that all websites now have to run their own YouTube style of content ID system. This would firstly be completely infeasible. YouTube's content ID system cost them something about 53 million a year to run. The other one, Article 11, which had been heavily criticised, was what was dubbed the link tax. So you could no longer, for example, let's say a newspaper ran an article, you could no longer link to that newspaper unless you paid what was called a link tax. So that, again, was a ridiculously stupid idea. And as I've said now, the whole thing was rejected by the European Parliament, kicked back to the Commission for changes to be happening, because, as I said at the beginning, digital laws need to be constantly updated, and, you know, because the internet moves forward. You cannot just say these laws that were made, what, 10 years ago are still valid today in today's current internet climate. It's just not feasible. So I agree with what they're doing, and the idea to create a digital single market in the EU is a completely good idea. That's a good thing. That's what we want. Good for actual people campaigning for this, because it shows that you can have an effect on the EU. So people like Sargon and Count Dankula, who are very anti-EU and who basically say, oh, these laws are going to get forced through, it's going to be terrible. Hang on a second, guys. The campaigning that went into this worked. This is why the European Parliament rejected this bill. This is why it's gone back to the Commission to be rewritten. And specifically, Article 13 and 11 were cited as the reasons why it was rejected. Now, you have big people in the music industry. Paul McCartney is massively supporting this, by the way, particularly Article 13 and 11. Now, that's beside the point, but one of the things I want to try and hammer home is a lot of these people, Sargon in particular, during his anti-EU campaigning, and still now, basically says, oh, you don't have any power in Parliament to to pass these laws? Well, all the well, actually, no, holding that out. Most of the UK MEPs did vote against it. One guy basically didn't vote because he never votes in the EU Parliament, and the rest, who are the UKIP people, didn't turn up because ever since the Brexit vote, they've basically just gone, we're out, we don't care. So, good on the ones for actually staying and actually doing their job. But yeah, these go to show you can actually affect European law, you can actually affect the European Parliament, and you do have power to affect European laws, even though all these anti-EU campaigners will say that you don't, when in fact this victory of defeating this bill in the Parliament, specifically Articles 13 and 11, goes to show you can have that power on the EU level. You just have to campaign for it. So, I have to ask the question, particularly of people like Sargon and the people who are anti-EU, who have been saying for years that we don't have power in the European Parliament and that we can't affect change. I present to you what we've just been talking about, and the fact that you can affect change.